La primera vez que supe de ella fue en diciembre del año 2018. Me recomendaron una lista, una serie de canalizadores y libros de muy alto valor, de valor excepcional. Su nombre estaba en esa lista. Hice lo que hacemos todo el mundo, la googleé y vi que ella canalizaba a un grupo de muy alta conciencia, de maestros ascendidos de muy alta conciencia, conocidos como Ananda. Jesús estaba en ese grupo de alta conciencia. Sí, Jesús, el de la Biblia. Mi primera reacción fue decir, vaya pirada, otra loca más que dice que canaliza a Jesús. Y la parte de mi vida no quería saber nada de esa información. 6 meses después, debido a una voz interior, a un sentimiento interior, retomé esas lecturas. Y debo reconocer que todo lo que leí, todo lo que aprendí, todo lo que de lo que me he empapado desde ese momento, me embrujó, me enamoró, me cautivó, me ha mantenido sumergido en una especie de bucle de aprendizaje del cual no quiero salir. Hoy, por primera vez, en un canal en español, Louise Spalding está aquí con nosotros. Y no te pierdas esta entrevista porque realmente merece la pena que la escuches, pero al final tiene un regalo para nosotros. El maestro canalizará con palabras especiales para el mundo católico, para la gente que habla español. No te pierdas esa entrevista que realmente te va a impactar. This is Main Sherpa. I am Carlos Lavado, host and one of the creators of this Awakening School. Our guest today is someone very, very, very special. She was a young shepherd when Jesus walked this planet, his student and his friend at the same time. She has channeled many books, including Jesús, mi autobiografía, and Un año de perdón, titles in Spanish, and both books already in Spanish. Her life work is speaking, writing, and teaching the core principles of truth of a group of no-physical teachers called Ananda, of course Jesus among them. It's my distinguished honor to introduce someone who I could not respect more. Louise Spalding, welcome to Mind Sherpa.
Thank you, Carlos. It's wonderful to be here in person. We've done lots of messaging through typing, but this is kind of our first encounter in person. So, well, virtually in person.
Pleasure.
So thank you for inviting me.
Before we started, I would like to say that this channel is in life. It was created because you inspired us. I said us, not just me. With me, there are a lot of people working in this, not translating, doubting, editing, all these kind of things. You inspire us. So when I said, Tina, welcome to my Sherpa, it's like say, Tina, welcome home. So Tina, welcome home.
Oh, thank you. It's very sweet.
My first question is, there are many, channels that start reaching to Spanish-speaking people, but to people who don't know you at all, how would you introduce yourself?
Well, it depends on who I'm talking to, because if when I start talking to people, very quickly I can kind of tell where they are in their consciousness evolution. So if I detect that somebody's pretty conventional, I'll tell them that I'm just a writer. And then if they ask a question and they'll say, well, what kind of books do you write? And I say, well, I write spiritual books. And they say, oh, what kind of subjects? And I say, oh, love and religion and all different kinds of things. And if they keep pushing, then eventually I will tell them that I'm a channeler. And many conventional people won't know what a channeler is. And then I'll say, well, I'm like a spiritual medium. And they're like, oh, okay, I understand. So with those kinds of introductions, I my goal is to keep the communication open. And if I tell some people I channel Jesus, the communication's over.
Oh.
So I'll start, and it'll be me interpreting their body language, the kind of questions they're asking. If I have a conversation with someone and they start talking about energy, or they start talking about reincarnation or something
That's
like
a
that,
good clue.
it gives me a good clue that they're not
Yeah.
so conventional. And then I start saying things like, I'm a channeler. And they're like, oh, okay, you're a channeler. And I say, yeah, I've channeled a bunch of books. And they're like, oh, cool. What about? And I say, you know, sex, death, Jesus. Then I start being a little bit more direct. And I say, oh, I have a lot of videos on YouTube. And they say, oh, okay, how do I find you? And I say, channeling Jesus. And then they look at me like, okay. And I say, don't let that intimidate you. I said, it's not religious. I said, it's based on A Course in Miracles and Jesus' true teachings, which are unconditional love and forgiveness. But usually I don't introduce myself that way until I know I'm talking to somebody who's open to it. So yeah. I have a few different ways of introducing myself.
Yes.
And then to people who are obviously extremely open, I just say I channel Jesus, and they're like, oh, cool. So it depends on who I'm talking to.
That was your vibration. I mean, that kind of people. So it's, you know, that is part of your team or whatever.
Yeah, and even for people who are unconventional, channeling Jesus is a challenge for them to accept. As it was for me. I wasn't happy when I first found out I was going to channel Jesus. It was not something I was seeking. It was a big psychological journey for me to get comfortable with that process.
Yeah, that's connect to my second question, because it's quite interesting when I explain people some ideas about Jesus, your channeling, and they ask me, where did you get that information? It is quite good, but where did you get? So I explain, well, there are a woman, her name is Tina Spalding, blah, 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 all this stuff. And they ask, well, she channeled Jesus. And they say, wait, why her? So that is the next question. What do you think, why you?
Well, apparently Jesus and I were friends in his lifetime. And when I first started, so I had what's called a Kundalini awakening, where for several weeks, I had massive amounts of energy going through my body, and my body would move spontaneously. And I was in a state of ecstasy. This was 12 years of studying A Course in Miracles, practicing forgiveness. I was a really dedicated student. So I wasn't scared of what was happening. I knew what a Kundalini awakening was. I'd read about, this is why yogis study yoga.
Yeah.
They want to have this elevation of consciousness experience. So I knew what was happening to me. So I completely surrendered to it. So I forgot the question. What was the question?
The question is, why you? Because many
why
people
me? Oh,
ask,
right. Okay. Yes, sorry.
Why her? Why you? Say,
why
well,
her?
Yeah.
So, okay. So when this first happened, I started writing automatic writing. So automatic writing is something people do. It's a way of spirit connecting, giving you messages where you write involuntarily. Somebody else is using your hand to write. And on that first evening, when Ananda first came through, I didn't know I was going to be channeling Jesus at that point. I was just making contact with my guides and teachers, Ananda. And they told me that I was a goat herder, a teenage boy, when Jesus was teaching, and that because I had goats, I could follow him around. Yeah. And so I would wander around with him. And through this automatic writing, they said that Jesus and I had become friends, that we would sit around the fire at night together and Jesus would teach me. And I have no conscious recollection of that. I don't have a past life memory of that. Although I did have a vision, I would have been in my early 20s. Yeah. And I had a vision of looking down at my feet. I was in the desert. So it was just like a snapshot, really, a very brief vision. where I looked down and I had robes and I had sandals on and my feet were men's feet. And then I looked out onto the horizon of the desert and I knew I was in the Middle East. And in that moment, I understood everything. I can't put it into words, as you know, when people have these kinds of experiences, you can't really explain what's happening. But in that moment, as I was looking out onto the desert, I understood everything. And that was the memory. So that's really the only conscious memory or conscious experience I've had. But I was always fascinated with the Bible from an archaeological point of view. So I took archaeology in university. I studied archaeology and anthropology. But one of the things I wanted to do was comparative religion. So I was always fascinated with religion. I grew up in a spiritualist household. So we had seances every Saturday night in my house as a child. So I grew up knowing that spirit was real, knowing that we continued on after death. I started reading the Bible a few times, even as a teenager. So the fascination with spirituality and religion was always there. I tried to go to church twice and spent a few minutes there.
Right?
Pardon?
Just try it. You mean?
Oh, well, I was seeking, I was suffering as a young woman. I was suffering with my mind and my body. I had eating disorders as a young woman. So I was having a hard time mentally and emotionally. So I went to church to try and find some kind of peace or some kind of help. No, that didn't take it. I was there for a few minutes and I was like, nah, this isn't sitting well with me. So that didn't work. So I started reading channeled material in my 20s. So I started reading the Seth material by Jane Roberts. And I found that very, very helpful because it was conveying this idea that we create our own reality and that we are powerful manifestors. But in terms of why Jesus picked me, I honestly think I attempted suicide when I was 17. I was in a very bad way mentally and emotionally. I think Jesus comes to people who need him. I really needed him. And I think because I went so far into suffering and was starting to bring myself out, that when the channeling came, it was sort of halfway through my recovery. And then the teachings brought me to a place of having a peaceful mind. So I've gone from the darkest dark, which is attempting suicide, to this place of peace and love. And so in that sense, I make a good teacher because wherever you are on that spectrum, I've been there. And I understand what it is to suffer. And my main motivation for doing this work when I first started channeling was people don't need to suffer, but they don't know. And that was really my main motivation.
So the raising of your frequency in just one incarnation is just a big step. It's huge. It's because just I mean, Course in Miracles, or maybe there are another factors there.
Well, they told me that this channeling was my life's purpose. So when I'm actually going to write my autobiography at some point, and I'm going to get Jesus to commentate through those difficult times. I think that would be really interesting to hear what Jesus and Ananda say about when I was deep in suffering and why I went through that pain. But when I look at my whole life, what I see is that all of the bad things that I went through make me a very, very good counselor. Because if someone's getting divorced, well, I've been divorced twice. If somebody's poor, well, I was poor most of my life. If somebody has body issues or eating disorder, been through that. I've gone through, so many trials.
You can say, I know what are you feeling. I know you're suffering because I suffer. You know what
but
I mean.
Honestly, I think it was a training program. I think I was being trained to understand the human condition so that when I began this work, I would understand where people are and I could help them.
So that was a really hard training. It was many years.
Oh yeah, I came close to not surviving many times. Yeah.
Quite difficult. And let's talk about the book, a book I said, Jesus, my autobiography.
Okay.
Because, be honest, I didn't know that a book that touched my life in the way that it did it. I mean, I never ever thought that just a normal book, quote unquote normal book, can change my life in the way that Jesus, my autobiography did it. So for me, it was really shocking in that time, because in that moment, I'm not even was quite sure you was channeling Jesus. But as long as I got the book and I started to reading, I said, oh no, I started crying. But I was in the underground here in London, so was really, crying in the underground, trying to control myself, and the people looking at me. Something is up. No, I'm okay.
I'm
Just
good. I'm
something
good.
went
It's
into
all
my
right.
eyes. You know, that's it.
It's just Jesus. It's just Jesus.
It's just. I know that is quite stupid now, because, but I did that. So I tried to control and yeah, pretending I'm not crying, but I was crying because the book. So, please, can you explain a little bit what that book means for the Catholic people?
For the what?
Catholic people,
For
Catholic
the
people.
Catholic people.
Yeah.
Okay, well, when Jesus, so I was channeling my second book, which was called Great Minds Speak to You When Jesus First Came Through. So Great Minds Speak to You is 20 famous people who have passed over. And in 1 month, I channeled these people. And they were all very, very famous people, like the Kennedys and Marilyn Monroe and Michael Jackson. And every morning I channel someone. It was really quite a ride, I have to tell you. I didn't know who was coming through each day. And at around the 15th person, I started, they told me there'd be 20 people. So around the 15th or 16th person, I thought, I wonder who the last person is. Elvis, Gandhi. And in my mind, I said, just don't be Jesus. Just don't be Jesus. That's what my mind was saying. Just don't.
You felt maybe. Yeah.
I think I felt him starting to, edge closer. And I was just like, just don't be Jesus. So for 3 or 4 days, that's what I was saying. Like, I'll channel anyone you want, but just don't be Jesus. Well, it turned out the 20th person was Jesus. And he came through and he talked about Jesus-y things, praying for your enemies, being loving. He didn't really say anything revolutionary. He kind of spoke the way you would expect Jesus to speak about things. And so when that was done, I knew the book was done and I thought, oh, okay, that wasn't so bad. And then the next morning he showed up again and he said, I want you to write my autobiography, but first you have to read the New Testament. He said, you need to know what people believe. He said, you need to have a structure in your mind so that I can hang my story on that structure. So I'd never read the New Testament from cover to cover. I certainly never been assigned that project. So I did as I was told, but very interesting thing happened. I got quite frightened that Jesus was asking me to do this. And he basically asked me to take, 24 hours to consider whether or not I would do it. And in that 24 hours, I had a fear of the Catholic Church arise in my mind. Now, I'm not Catholic. I've never been to Catholic Church. I thought that was really interesting that a fear of the Catholic Church came up in that 24 hours. And I thought, this is the kind of thing that people get put away for doing. They get killed for doing it, or they get put in a mental asylum or something. And then Tina's kind of spunky attitude came through, and I said, well, I never wanted a boring life anyway. I'm going for it. But it was very interesting that a fear of the Catholic Church came up. So what I realized in my experience there was that the church has made it very, very clear not to interfere in these kinds of things. And what Jesus said at the beginning of this book is that your world cannot heal itself until you understand who I truly was. And I'm writing this book so that you get the truth of who I was, not the church's version, not the Christian church's version, not the Catholic church's, but my version. And he said, basically, I'm reclaiming my name because so much has been done in my name that is wrong. That is wrong. And so and what are you going to say if Jesus offers you a job like that? No. And I was like, okay. But it was a huge psychological journey. And several times during the book, I stopped because it was overwhelming emotionally and intimidating. I wouldn't tell anybody what I was doing. They're like, oh, what are you up to? And I'm like, oh, nothing, you know, painting houses. I was a house painter.
Yeah.
And at one point, I actually had put the book aside. It was on my computer. I was like, I can't do this. And I had gone back to house painting, and I fell down an 18-foot ladder and broke my foot and ended up being crippled for 6 months and sitting in front of my computer in a wheelchair, unable to do anything except finish the book. So
the thing is, that is one of my questions, because you tell that story in Love and Map and Altered, that book. You tell that story, you say that, and you describe a phrase there. I said, not even channeling Jesus can, I say, not even channeling Jesus can protect me from my own frequency.
Yeah.
So I remember at that time I was translating 40 Days of 49.
Yeah.
I was, some difficult time with my ego. So I was in that situation. And when I was reading, I remember when I was reading that book, said, oh, not even Jesus can protect me from my own frequency. So it's your job, it's my job.
Yeah, and the fact is, and what that refers to is free will. We all have free will, and we've all come into this state of separation away from God as we believe it to be, that we're, we feel alone, we feel separated from God. A lot of people don't feel him, don't see him, they feel alone, but we've chosen to come here, and we have to choose to go in the opposite direction of separation, which is forgiveness and love. But they can't make us do it. We have to do it voluntarily. And so what most people are experiencing in their spiritual journey, whether it's at church or whether it's doing A Course in Miracles, is they're experiencing this split. The desire for the world, the desire for sex, drugs, rock and roll, the desire for money, the desire for power, the desire for this experience, this human experience. And then we're also experiencing inspiration and creativity and love and these higher aspects of our mind. So really, it's the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other. That's where that story comes from. We are all experiencing a confusion, a desire for love and connection to spirit, and a lust, a love, a belief in the world and all that it has to offer us. And that's why we have this sort of trials and tribulations, and we have mixed emotions, and we have good days and bad days, because we're going back and forth between these two aspects, but they are not good and evil in the traditional sense that you might think of it from the church's point of view. They are our minds being reflected back to us. So it's always us. We are not being tempted by the devil. We are chasing after the idols that we came here to chase after. So we all came to this world to experience physical, material things that we still believe in. The Bible might call them false idols. But we also have this desire to return home to God. And that's really the journey that we're on. And you, for example, saying there, you're doing a translation, which is your desire to connect to spirit. You feel it, you love it. And then this voice comes in, but Why
Yeah.
don't you do this? Or
Exactly like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really a split mind. So
Yeah.
that's what everybody's journey is choosing love more and more frequently, choosing forgiveness more and more frequently. And that's why Jesus made such a big deal about forgiveness, because forgiveness is the way that you let the world go. You let the material world and separation is maintained by judgment. Judgment is the ego's food, and it's war's food, and it's hatred's food. And so the less we judge, the closer to love we get, and the better we feel. So this is really about understanding that when we feel happy and connected and content, we're on the right track. If we feel judgmental, angry, self-righteous, you could put any list of negative emotions on there.
Things.
We have sided with the shadow side of our mind, and we are walking away from love, and that's why we feel bad. So the teachings really say there's one road. You're either walking to love or you're walking away from love. The further away from love you get, the darker your life gets. Right? So that's what we're all deciding. And we can be going back and forth towards love and back. We can do it many times a day based on the decisions that we're making. So really, these books that I've channeled are designed to help people understand their minds and to understand that your guidance system, how you feel, is a gift from God to help you find your way. So suffering and sacrifice, which has been really perpetuated by the church, makes you feel bad. That means you're off track, you're heading the wrong way. Whereas following the things you love, being creative, adventuring in the world, in places that you enjoy, that make you happy, that means you're on track. God wants us to be happy. God doesn't want us to suffer. That's it in a nutshell. But it's been very, very confused by religious teachings and conventional teachings.
And can you describe Jesus' physical appearances? It's not just a curiosity. My idea is demystify one of the Catholic ideas about Jesus' images. I mean, blue eyes, blonde hair. You know, I mean that. In the book Jesus Maria Toravio, you told us about Jesus' physical appearance. Can you describe it for the people who are listening?
I can't think of the exact words, but basically he said he had black curly hair that was kind of shoulder length because it got too unruly in the desert if it got longer. And he said basically, I look like a terrorist.
I remember that.
He said, I look like you'd think a terrorist looked like. So he looked like a Middle Eastern man. I always envision him as very handsome, though. So that's just me.
Of course, yes. No, of course, yes.
He obviously was a very charismatic person, and people loved being around him. But my feeling is that, we've all been around people who aren't necessarily beautiful, but they have a very nice energy about them, and we enjoy being around them. So I think he was very attractive on many levels, probably energetically. People found him irresistible, as you and I have found him. Like, here we are doing this work. This work
because of him.
It's irresistible, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Even though we could be laughed at, or in the beginning, like I said, I was worried that I might be arrested or put in a mental institution or something. And but I continued on because the work is so true and clear. And the thing that I love about it is that it's logical and it makes sense. It's logical and it makes sense, and it explains the suffering in the world, which traditional religion really doesn't. It says things like God moves in mysterious ways when someone can't explain, why babies die of leukemia, why these things that
why if you are a good person you suffer.
It doesn't why if what the Bible teaches is true, if you were a good person, you wouldn't suffer, but it's not true. So the reason I loved A Course in Miracles, which is, of course, what led to my channeling Jesus, and I studied that for 12 years very, very deeply, was that it explained everything. It explained why, for example, I had had an eating disorder and I was obsessed with my physical appearance. It explains how the ego uses the body as a weapon. And manipulates us through the body and how we use the body. So there were things like that which got my attention very, very early on in the course. But when I first started reading the course, I had 2 out-of-body experiences within 3 weeks of starting the course. I'd never had an out-of-body experience in my life. And on two consecutive days when I was doing my Course in Miracles lessons, I left my body and I was taken into another realm and given messages. And I was like, whoa, because I didn't really know what A Course in Miracles was when I started reading it. My sister bought it and gave it to me. I didn't have a computer. I didn't have a TV. So this book was, I had no idea. I didn't even know who wrote it. I didn't know that Jesus was the voice in A Course in Miracles until he said something about my crucifixion. And then I was like,
say, okay,
whoa, hang on a second. What?
What?
This is Jesus talking. Oh, okay. Yeah, I had a very unusual experience, which most people don't get to have now. I sort of had this very pristine experience with A Course in Miracles because I was not influenced by any teachers. I was not watching videos. I was not reading any other books. I had this very, very unique, which is very difficult to have right now because of the proliferation of videos, which are very, very helpful. But I think in some way I was very fortunate. I had this very sort of kind of a monastic experience.
Yeah, clear mind at that time.
It was very clear. It was very clear.
Yeah. Please, the next is A Year of Forgiveness, Un Año de Perdón, because I really love this book as well, and I'm quite sure that in time, maybe 10 years time, many universities will teach this book because it's like a manual. I always say to people, say, no, it's going to be impossible. No, and believe me, I don't know when exactly, but in time, this book is going to be teaching in some universities because it's like, for the first time we have the manual to master our mind. So I think that is the importance of that book, A Year of Forgiveness, Un Año de Perdón in Spanish. So can you as well describe how was the process of this book?
Well, I think it was 2019 it came through. It was, I think, New Year's Eve. And I thought, I'm going to do the lessons of A Course in Miracles this year. I'm going to do one a day. I didn't think about it because if I'd thought about it, I wouldn't have done it because it was a very big project. But I've been doing a lot of YouTube videos and I thought, yeah, tomorrow I'll do lesson 1 and I'll see what Jesus has to say. I didn't think it through at all. Like I say, if I had, I probably wouldn't have done it. As most things in my life, if I think it through, I wouldn't have done it. So that morning, I read I explained what A Course in Miracles was. I read the first lesson, and then Jesus came through and gave his commentary on that lesson. And it was very cool. And then the next day I did it again, and the next day I did it again. And very, very quickly in the comments, people started saying, I can't wait for tomorrow's lesson. I'm so curious to hear what Jesus has to say. And then if I was late, so normally I would do the lesson in the morning, right? But, I travel and I've got a life. And sometimes I wouldn't do the lesson until 6 o'clock at night. And the comments were, where's Tina? Where's Jesus? Why aren't you doing it? And I'm like, whoa, everybody
They're complaining about that.
They're complaining about it. And a few times I had to say, look, you need to go back so that be a day behind so that you're not waiting for me. But I think it was an indicator of how interested people were. So basically I did 365 videos. Sometimes I would have to do 3 or 4 videos in one day because I was traveling or driving or didn't know if I was going to be able to load up a video. So sometimes it got very complicated for me to do it, but I managed to do all 365 videos. And then I left it at that. I didn't really think about making it into a book, but somebody had done 365 drawings of A Course in Miracles, and she contacted me and she said, I'd like to volunteer these images if you make this into a book with no cost to you. And they were really cute. If you've seen the book, they're very sweet little colorful images. And so we transcribed all those lessons. Somebody helped me, a man called Ian Elsinger. He helped me do that. And we sent it to the publisher. And then I had to fight for the way I wanted the book to look. Because these images were color, all other books had been printed in black and white. But this meant we had to do a 4-color print, which was very expensive. Yeah. I also wanted gold edges on the book. Because the publisher in China, he had done Jesus, My Autobiography with gold edges, and I saw how beautiful it looked. So he did a hardcover of Jesus, My Autobiography with gold edges, and I saw it and I said, I want gold edges on this. I said, this is going to be a manual that people who do A Course in Miracles are going to want to have. I said, you're going to sell a lot of these. And anyway, I managed to talk her into it. And so we got this beautiful full color book with gold edges, and it looks like the Bible. It looks like A Course in Miracles.
It's like a mix of them, yeah.
It's a very beautiful book. And I think that is the Jesus book and A Year of Forgiveness are going to be those books that on my deathbed, I'll feel very pleased that I brought into this world. And I know that those books are transforming people's lives, you know. Yeah. People write and tell me. I mean, look at what you're doing, Carlos. I mean, this has become your purpose, and your desire to spread this message it's not optional now. It's like it's what you do.
It's right? Not. I cannot even stop it. Try me. Try me. And sometimes I said, okay, it's too much for me. But day after, I wake up and said, oh no, I want to do it again. It's like something's pushing me. Yeah.
And the thing, like, I think the truth of the matter is, for a lot of urban people, life is pretty mundane. It's pretty boring. If you don't have a passion and a purpose, then you end up watching television, you end up drinking too much, you end up watching too much soccer on TV, whatever it is. Life isn't that interesting unless you have something that awakens your spirit. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing these days is this is one of Jesus's phrases, your passion is your purpose. So this is one of the things that religion has really undermined in people, this idea that if you love something, that somehow that's self-centered or selfish. I do a lot of artwork, and that's one of the ways that spirit speaks through me is doing art. But it could be gardening, it could be parenting, it could be jewelry making. If your passion makes you love life, then that is God's will for you. And this is one of the things I love about the Course in Miracles, is that it returns to us this idea that happiness is what God wants for us, and that joy and creativity is what God wants for us. We're made in the image of God. God is loving, creative, and freedom. Freedom is free. God is free. God can do whatever God wants. And we're made in that image, and our freedom, our love, and our creativity is very important to us.
Yeah. Do you speak Jesus or Ananda on a regular basis? I mean, while no are channeling, just, you know what I mean?
What they have said to me is that they speak to me through my feelings. So they said, if you're interested in something, that's us telling you to go there. So I don't actually micromanage my life with channeling, although I'm always listening to the channeling as it's happening. And as the channeling's going through me, it changes me. So really, I've been doing the course for about 20 years now. So I just live my life listening to my guidance, doing what I love, obviously following my passion and purpose, which is these teachings. So I don't have a lot of decisions to make. My decisions are really easy to make for me because I have been eliminating suffering. I've been eliminating what I don't like for many, many years. So my life really is the way I like it and what feels good to me. There's a few issues that I still have, I'll say, negative emotion around, and that's where I know I've got work to do. And I negotiate with them. You know, sometimes I'll say, well, I'm willing to work on this problem, but don't scare me. Don't make it too, don't bring too much to me too quickly. So I work on my issues all the time in my mind. If I have fears come up or judgments come up, I work on them all the time, but I don't micromanage myself, no.
That's related to the next question. How is your relationship with your ego? Because you know how your ego works. It's not the same like a person who has no idea about the ego, but you know how the ego works, but the ego still is there.
Yes.
So it should be nice if you explain us how you manage that, because it's like a very high class.
Well, the way I recognize when my ego is active is that I have a strong negative reaction to something. So when I'm calm and peaceful and creative, throughout the day, if my mind is at peace and I'm content, then I know I'm in spirit and I'm aligned with what I'm meant to be doing. If I start to get something going on in my mind, then I know my ego has been triggered. So I'll give you an example. I've had a business meeting in the last couple of weeks with some people, and it's not working out. I've decided not to go ahead with whatever they were proposing. But my mind won't let it go. It won't let it go. It just keeps nagging me. So last night I was actually talking to Carol, and I said, I need to figure out why this is bothering me. So that's how I know that something in me has been brought up that's out of alignment, because I can't stop thinking about it. There's a judgmental aspect to my mind, my thoughts. You know, they shouldn't have done that, or I don't want this to happen. So there's some fear in there. There's some confusion in there. So what I do in that circumstance is I say to myself, what's the worst thing that can happen? What is it I'm afraid of here? And what I came up with is that I actually have a fear of confrontation with people. And this is something that will make me not speak when I should speak. It'll make me go, okay, when actually I don't want to do something. Okay. And I think this came, my first marriage was very violent and unpleasant. And I was with that person for 5 years, and confrontation was dangerous. So what the ego does is it looks at something that was dangerous and says, anytime I see something like that, I'm going to back away because it's safer to back away. So this is how the ego will play out in me, for example. That traumatic and dangerous 5 years has made me very vigilant against confrontation, or what the ego says is dangerous situations where someone's going to attack me or judge me. So that's something that I'm working on. And I always recognize it because the mind starts working. It starts to look for an escape hatch. It wants to get away. It doesn't want to deal with it. But really, the ego is not a bad thing. So in that circumstance, my ego is trying to keep me safe. It actually is not evil.
That's the purpose,
That's its purpose. We want to keep you alive. And so the course teaches this. The ego is directly associated with survival of the physical body. So the ego and the physical body go together. So when you so when you have something that threatens your physical survival, the ego will be triggered and it will start to try and make you do things. It could make you attack somebody. It could make you run away. It could make you lie. It could make you cheat, because it's trying to get you in the best situation possible for survival. So that's how I really look at the ego. When it gets triggered, I go, okay, good. This is something unconscious that's becoming conscious. Can I figure out what the message is? Can I figure out what's happening? So in this particular circumstance, the assignment I've given myself is to say what I want to the business people, and to be honest and authentic and not fearful, so that I'm facing my ego's fears and I'm dissolving its story, which is confrontation is dangerous. So that's the story my ego has. Confrontation is dangerous. So what I'm coming at this with is, now I'm going to resolve this calmly, because intellectually I understand I'm not under threat, but my ego is acting as if it is under threat. So that's just kind of a little microcosm of the way I use the course and the way I respond to the ego getting triggered. So the best thing to do is, when your ego gets triggered, you say, oh, this is really good. This is important to my ego. It thinks survival is dependent on this, or its desire for judgment has been triggered, and that's really how the ego initially manifests. It will be very judgmental. These are bad people. They shouldn't have done that. I'm not going to do this. And it wants to get into a battle. So that's a little microcosm of
Thank you for sharing your insights. That's really, really appreciated. Two questions before we finish, because the time is flying. One is about feminism. Jesus, in the book, Jesus, my autobiography, he declares himself as a feminist. But obviously, it's not the 21st century feminism.
No.
So what is your opinion about 21st century feminism for the young women that are listening this
Well, this is a very interesting subject, because I always was, I was in the workforce in my 20s, in the late 70s, early 80s. So, for example, I'll give you an example. I was a cartographer, so I drew maps and did aerial photography interpretation in my 20s. Mostly not a girl's job, mostly guys did this. And so in the office, if the secretary would go for lunch, they'd ask me to answer the phone. They wouldn't ask the guys to answer the phone. They would ask me to answer the phone, and I would say, I don't do phones. Ask somebody else. So I would say no to this, because at that time in the workforce, women were just coming into the workforce, and they were kind of being put into the less valued jobs, answering the phone, making the coffee. And I'd say no. So I would consider myself a feminist back in those days. I am a mother of two children. They're men now. They're 27 and 31. And I think going through motherhood and having children, and also seeing society's, I'll say, the degradation of the family through kids being raised in childcare, both parents working. I think we're starting to see that the negative effects of the family being less cohesive. What I think is the best thing is what Jesus did. He said he loved and respected Mary for the things that she was good at, and he provided a certain kind of contribution to the family. She provided a certain kind of contribution to the family. And for anyone who's given birth to children, they know that this is a massive undertaking, and physically you are for years dedicated to the survival and well-being of those children. I was very fortunate. I didn't have to put my children in daycare. I was an artist at the time, and I was able to work at home, and my husband and I did 50-50. So I made a good living from my art. So I would work for 3 or 4 hours a day. Then he would go to work. So my children always had one of two parents with them. So to me, that's the ideal, is that you have a partner that respects your what a woman brings to the table. After all, we are a channel for the divine, in the sense that we can bring children through, which is the most creative job on the planet. So I think it deserves respect and love. And the power within the family needs to be equitable, in the sense that if you're at home with the children, just because you're not making any money or as much money does not mean that what you're doing is not valued. And I think it's the value on female work and female qualities that is lacking in sort of a more traditional patriarchal structure. So I kind of look at the way I raise my kids, and what happened with my kids was they had a great relationship with their father because he spent time with them. And they're young and they're men, so they need to have a good father figure. Now, I was a real feminist. My children have my surname. They don't have their father's surname.
That is unusual.
Because he had 2 children in a previous marriage that had his name. So I said, well, then these 2 get my name. And he went along with it. So I was a feminist, but I think it has to be, I think real feminism is valuing both the masculine and the feminine, their differences and what they bring to the table, and collaborating together rather than seeing someone as the enemy or somebody,
attacking something,
or even wanting to have the same life as a man has. I think most women are, if let's say they have a natural tendency to, this has been proved scientifically by someone like Jordan Peterson. He does lectures
I follow him as well.
That women have a tendency to be more agreeable. They have a tendency to be more emotional. They have a tendency to be more caring. We are hardwired to look after babies, whether or not modern women think that. Evolutionarily speaking, we're hardwired to look after babies. It makes us more sensitive. It makes us more caring. It doesn't mean we're weak or valueless. It means that we have been designed perfectly by the divine to keep babies alive. And I think everyone should listen to Jordan Peterson. I highly recommend. Because they look at the statistics and they look at the tendencies, and I think it's really modern feminism has, I think, kind of become lost, and especially in the new woke society. I'm not on board with the whole new liberal way of looking at things. I think society's really going off track, and I think that's why these books that have come through and Jesus' teachings are so important. They're so important.
In this time. The last one is a personal one, in the sense about your dream. Do you have any dream, personal dream? I mean, not piece on a word, it's personal. Do you have any personal dream you need to achieve or you want to follow?
I think one of the reasons that I was chosen to do this work is that I had kind of given up on having dreams. I had actually come to a place through doing A Course in Miracles where I was very neutral about what Tina, the individual, wanted in her life. So I had had ambitions when I was younger. I wanted to be a famous artist, but that was very ego driven. And I think there came to a point where I just said, the prayers I was actually saying when I started to channel were this: please make me a perfect communication device for God. That was my prayer. And the reason I would say that prayer was because I still, even 12 years into doing A Course in Miracles, I wasn't that interested in the world. I wasn't that interested in becoming something. My fascination with spiritual material was the most important thing in my life, that and my artwork. And so I don't really have any personal goals. I mean, this work, the books, I was never this ambitious. I would never have dreamt to have 8 books published. I would never have dreamt that people are channeling because they've been following this work. It's just so much more than I ever would have thought of. But I think that's why it happened, because my ego wasn't involved. My ego didn't want anything. I think the place that I got to was a sort of happy, content place of humility in a way, which was very different than Tina before the course. Happy and humble was not what I was. But I think because the ego had been subdued through doing this work, that, I see how much influence it has. If my ego was still active, you could make people do anything. You could make people do anything. And I have no desire. I keep a very low profile in my personal life. I keep my work separate from my personal life. If Oprah phones me tomorrow and says, come on, I'll go on there. I'd be much more reluctant to do that now than 10 years ago. 10 years ago, that would have been a dream. But now I would think, oh, that's going to be too much fame. I'm not, I'm not interested in that, right? So personal, I'd like to remain healthy for a long time so that I can continue to do this work. I would love to see Jesus, my autobiography, made into a movie.
Should be great, everyone.
That's what I would love to see, but it has to be made in a way that is an epic movie. It can't be done cheaply or badly.
I see it's not the time now, right? It's not exactly this year. Maybe.
I don't know that any time will be right for that story, because it would upset so many people. That story would upset so many people. It would be a controversial movie no matter when it's made. But I trust that if it's meant to be made, then somebody will approach me who's got the ability and the talent and the money to do it, because it would be very expensive to make. So that is something, but it's not really an ambition. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, okay.
Tina, do you think could be some kind of channeling for the Spanish-speaking people about, a special word for the Catholic minds?
Sure. Let's see what Jesus has to say.
Thank you so much.
You are blessed beings indeed. I am that one that you know as Jesus. When you are raised as a Catholic and you are taught repeatedly over and over many, many things, one of the things that you experience is fear and guilt. So when you experience fear and guilt, according to the true teachings of the one you know as Jesus, you are off track. Your feelings are telling you that you have stepped away from love. So what happens when you feel guilt? You did something and now you wish you hadn't done it. You did something because at the time it made sense, or it was the most expedient thing to do, and now you regret it, or somebody has told you you're bad, you shouldn't have done it. And you will feel this thing called guilt. Oh, I'm a bad person. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said that. I wish I'd raised my children differently, or I wish I had done this, or I wish I had done that. But the truth of the matter is you cannot undo the past. And this is one of those things that is, we'll call it a pointless emotion. Guilt is a pointless emotion because whatever you did happened and it is done. It is over. You can't change the past. All that's happening when you feel guilt is you are judging yourself for something that cannot be undone in the ego's eyes. The ego says, you did a bad thing, you're a bad person. That is not how we speak to you. That is not how Spirit speaks to you. Spirit says, learn from your experiences and change your behavior in the present. And if that was an error, then it can be undone by the Holy Spirit. All you have to do is ask. And this idea of sin has to be addressed here. Because you're taught to believe in sin, you have to look at what sin is. Sin is something that should not have happened. Sin is something, an attack against God, if you will. That's the way it is portrayed. But God allows everything to happen on this plane. Everything that is happening, if God didn't want it to happen, it wouldn't happen. So everything that's happened, everything that you've done, everything that you're going to do, you are allowed to do. You are not punished by God for these things. You will learn natural consequences through experience. How else can you learn except through experience? So, for example, if you steal money from the cash till at work and you get away with it for a while and it helps you buy a nice pair of shoes or whatever you've stolen it for, it seems to be a good thing. And then you get caught. And then you get called to the office and they show you a video of you stealing money and you feel terrible. And this bad thing now happens. What happens from Spirit's point of view in that experience is we look at that and we say, this human is learning. This human is growing. They now see that what they were doing was wrong, but it's not evil. It's not a sin against God. God is and this is going to shock you, God doesn't really care what happens here on earth. This is counter to everything you've been taught. But the truth of the matter is, the way Spirit observes you on this earth plane is the same way that a parent will look at children playing in a sandbox. So you have two children playing in a sandbox. One's the good guy, one's the bad guy. One has a big truck, the other has a smaller truck. The big truck rolls over the smaller truck. The children are playing a game of good and evil, duality, big and small, powerful and weak. As a parent, looking at those children playing in the sandbox, you don't believe in what they're doing. You don't believe that one of them is good and one of them is evil. You see that they are playing a game and they are learning. And that is exactly how Spirit views what you do here on the earth plane. You are not your bodies. You are eternal spiritual beings. And that is how these games are viewed, as exactly that. The world is a stage and you are merely players playing roles. And when you pass over at the end of your incarnation, you will understand and you will be given the opportunity to reflect upon your life, and you will see where you made good decisions. You will see where you made less than ideal decisions, and you will be given the opportunity to design another experience where you will get another opportunity to learn what you didn't learn in this incarnation. You will not be sent to hell. You will not be punished. You will be given another opportunity. It's just like failing a grade at school. Oh, you're going to have to redo that grade. You may not be happy about redoing that grade, but you're being given the opportunity to redo that grade. So what we want you to understand is that your personal point of power is this present moment. This is the moment where you decide, am I going to choose the loving path or am I going to choose the fearful path? And when you choose the fearful path, guilt, shame, suffering, however you want to word it, there are many negative emotions that don't feel good. That is your clue that you are not choosing the right path. So if you're judging somebody because they didn't come to church on Sunday, you think you feel bad because they didn't come to church on Sunday. But you actually feel bad because you're judging them. You have disconnected yourself from love. You've stepped further away from love, and so you feel bad. But what the ego mind does is it blames something outside of itself for feeling bad. So you would say, oh no, I'm angry because that person didn't do what God wants them to do. What we would like to say to everybody that believes in God, that believes in Jesus' teachings is this: happiness is your natural inheritance. Guilt, shame, fear, and suffering are your sign that you're off track. They're your sign that your mind has thought something that is unloving about yourself or about someone else, about a situation. And so what we would say to you as Catholic people is understand that joy and happiness is what God wants for you. That is the natural state of being that you have when your mind is focused correctly. So you have to understand this. When your mind is focused incorrectly, you will feel bad. When your mind is focused correctly in a loving way on things you like and things that are good and things that you want more of, you will feel happy and content. Now, when you have been raised in a teaching that is giving you information that's incorrect, you are going to feel confused by things like bad things happening to good people, children dying young. These kinds of things are not going to make sense to you if you believe in a loving God. So what happens? If God is loving and bad things are happening, then you have to have some force that is equal and opposite to God. And so that becomes the devil, that becomes evil. But the truth of the matter is, all evil is something that is very, very far away from love. All a bad person is, a criminal, a drug dealer, is a person who has continually taken steps away from love, away from truth. But for the average person, they're not drug dealers or prostitutes or criminals. They are unhappy. They are judgmental. They are lonely. They are sad. They are broke. These are the things that ordinary humans have to deal with. And what we want you to take away from this today is this. If you are unhappy, look at what you're thinking about. Look at what you're focusing on. That is what's making you unhappy. If you are judging your body, for example, or judging your partner and saying, this does not look good enough, they are not good enough, and this is making you unhappy, change your focus. Look at something that is good about your body. Oh, my lungs work, my legs work, I can digest food, I can see, I can hear. How about I be grateful and loving to this vehicle that lets me move around? Instead of judging it because it's a little bit soft in places, look at what your body is really doing and giving you the opportunity for. This is merely a shift in consciousness, and you will go from hating your body to respecting and loving your body for the gift it gives you. Looking at your partner and saying, oh, he does this or she does that. Look at all the other things they do. They go to work and they contribute money to the family. They mow the lawn, they do the dishes, they help bathe the children. What is it that they do? Focus on what they do and let the judgment go. The one thing that is not perfect, let it go and appreciate with gratitude. This is what the teachings of Jesus are about. It is about appreciation. But the thing that has been lost in translation in the text that you call the Bible is your guidance system. And this idea that suffering and sacrifice are holy. They are not holy. Suffering and sacrifice mean you have stepped away from love. And that is the teaching, the true teaching of the one you know as Jesus, that love is the solution, and any situation that is not going well will be made better by love. I am that one that you know as Jesus. We hope that you are courageous and you take the time to read some of the books that this being has brought forth. They will assist you in understanding your heart, your mind, your connection to the divine. We will speak to you again at another time.
Thank you, Tina.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Thank you so much. And with this channel, we finished. I really thank you. So I think it's gonna be very, very helpful for many Spanish-speaking people. Not just the channeling, Jesus channeling about almost about your course as well and your experience. So thank you for accepting this invitation. please remember this is your home.
Oh, thank you. And Carlos, I really want to thank you for the work that you've done. I mean, the Spanish-speaking world is a very, very big world, and you're absolutely amazing to do this translation for us, and to be bringing this work to Spanish-speaking people. I can't speak Spanish. I can't translate a book into Spanish. So, you know, the work that you're doing is really, really valuable, and I want you to really know that I'm deeply appreciative of what you've been doing.
Thank you so much, Tina. It's a pleasure, but I think it's almost as well my purpose of life.
It's your purpose now. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're in the same boat. We're condemned for the rest of our lives to do this work. But, you know, we're happy. And as you say, some days you're like, I don't want to do this. And if I have a day where I just want to be an ordinary person, I let myself be an ordinary person. I take my dog for a walk, and I paint, and I do my ordinary gardening or whatever. And very shortly I'm bored and I want to get back to doing this. So it's okay to take a day off here and there.
Okay. Thank you, Tina. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much.
All right.